Hola community, welcome to another episode of Blender Today live. For the second time in a few days, we did a live stream on Friday here from the studio, covering what's new in the film world in Blender Studio. Finally, the Sprite Fried Open Movie Project, the number 13, has been released on Friday, together with last week was Blender 3.0 beta, and also Blender 3.1 alpha. So I think it was the busiest week of the year. I was also sick on Monday, so I couldn't do this live stream, and Tuesday and Wednesday it was such a so many things, a bit overwhelming, but we have this week to make up for it. So let's see what's new in Blender 3.0 beta. That it sounds so weird to say it. Remember, this stream is live, so if you have some questions, I'm not going to be sure we're gonna be answering many of them, because it's the list today is just a bit crazy. I can actually show you, like, look at that. Well, actually all of this is in the description, so if you want to go ahead and just jump into what's new without seeing it here, feel free. So you've probably seen Blender 3.0 beta by now. If you haven't, you may have missed this beautiful splash screen, which is now available on Blender.org. You can download the splash screen. Remember, this is for this only works on Blender 3.0 and newer. So yeah, it is already available, free for everyone to download. You don't need, it's on Blender Cloud, but you don't need to be you don't need to have an account. It's just open. Okay, what else? Sprite Fright, if you know this character, is from Sprite Fright from the Blender Studio. Did you see that? Did you see the, what do you think about that? It's the first time ever Blender has a whoosh, any, like, an animation, anything. All in the previously it was always like Blender Institute, Blender Foundation, or whatever identity crisis we were going through by then. So let's see what's new. If you haven't seen this film, one way you can help Blender, if you want to help Blender, is to share this. Let's see how fast we can get to I don't know. Wow, spring is 7 million already. Okay, how fast we can get to 1 million? That's already asking a lot. But if you have watched it on Friday and the subtitles were not there for your language, there are already a few more options now available. There is German, Italian, Portuguese, and Spanish was available on Friday. But yeah, just to let you know that there are some more coming. If you want to write those in your language, get in touch. Maybe would be good to add a few more. I think French is a big one that it's missing at the moment. So okay, without further ado, let's jump into what's new in Blender 3.0. I have a bunch of sections today. I have asset browser, there is the sequencer, there's a user interface, a big one there, geometry nodes. What else? Grease pencil, cycles, and yeah, so much. So let's get to it. I am reading you, by the way. I have the chat here. Sprite is too scary, but it's a Halloween film, so it makes sense. It's 19 frame. What? Oh yeah, people are asking about the frame rate. I think it's not very common for 3D films to shoot in twos, like 2 frames. Every frame, every action, every movement will be 2 frames. But if you watch Into the Spider-Verse, they did a great example over there where they mix between 1 frame per second and 2 frames per second, sorry, per like action, or in twos, in ones or twos. Okay, let's get to it. Dun, dun, dun. Let's see. First of all, the big one. Okay, let's put the thing. Okay, geometry nodes, or node editor in general, actually. And the node editor has a new interface. Some changes in many changes in the way the nodes are drawn, and also in the way the wires are drawn. So we're gonna see the type of the node already in the tree. So you probably have seen it already, but if you haven't, you may notice that some wires, or probably you've seen it online. It was all the rage a few days ago, last week when this was added. The colors of the wires are taken from the socket types, which it makes it super nice when you're, for example, mixing some types. So if you mix two types like color that are compatible, of course, you're gonna see this switching. So you can see that, oh, this get converted, right? RGB, so RGB and vectors XYZ it's all vectors, so it all makes sense. When it's not possible, you're gonna see the good old red, thick red outline. So that hasn't changed, but you may have noticed that the drawing has changed. But let's not get ahead of ourselves there. The here in the top right, you're gonna find the overlay. So similar to what we see in the viewport, now we have node editor overlays. So far there's two options. There's wire colors to disable this in case you're not liking it as much. I think everybody that I've seen has it on. I think it's a at first it's shocking, so that's also why the colors are being removed, but I think most people are using it. And then annotations, in case you want to get rid of, they're also part of the overlay. What else do you think it should go here? At some point we had a grid, the grid here, but it was yeah, it's not an overlay, it's more like an underlay. I don't know if that counts as such. So yeah, we'll see. I see a bunch of questions in the chat. Remember, you can leave the questions if you go to Blender.community, and you can just leave the comments here. We're gonna try to answer them towards the end of the show. So let's see. Next, what is else? What else has been added? Oh, by the way, there's a user theme setting that also has been added for fields. So if you have some kind of fields, you see this wire line, there is also a setting now where in the theme settings where you can tweak the opacity of that. It's in the user preferences under node editor and their dash lines opacity. So 0 and 1, which somebody mentioned that it should be the other way around, and actually I think it's I think it makes, well, no, the dash lines, the opacity is 0, so you don't see those. Or I don't know, it's one of those things that is like, oh, actually it's the other way around. So yeah, you can control if you don't like it. By default, I think it works pretty well. That's another thing that I was pretty happy to see, that people actually like the default values of 0.5, I think, 0.4, because it is it tells you that there is it's a different type of data that is going through, that it's not just values, but it's actual functions. So kind of like that. The other change I mentioned, and you've probably seen, is that the drawing of the nodes has changed itself. Previously, all the nodes were transparent by default, and that was something that was a bit problematic on my I think, because yeah, you couldn't have a fully opaque node. You always had like something behind, and that is a user preference that always has been the alpha. The backdrop, the node backdrop, always had an alpha value, but sometimes it wasn't just, before it wasn't being really, even on one, the alpha, it wouldn't be completely opaque. Now it is. So choices, yay. When you have the node selected, it's always going to be opaque, so it's easier to read. And also the collapsing of the nodes now is using the similar chevron down arrow. So it is a bit similar. The outline, it's a bit thicker. The outline here in the sockets is also thicker, and it's the same width as the outline here, and also the underlying headline there. So I think it all makes a bit more consistency. There is a on muted nodes that hasn't changed. Actually, this image is outdated, but the muted nodes are transparent like they used to be, and also have a darker header color. So next, the next, removing, okay, I think that is all for the node. Well, actually, since I'm here, you may have noticed that the backdrop is different. So It's a bit hard to see first. There might be some tweaking needed to see if you want to make it more obvious, but the background is now a grid. So for the future, for editors where the grid is not so important, now there is instead of always having the quad grid, there will be a like this dotted grid, which it gets less on the way. When you're zoomed out, you barely see it, and when you're zoomed in also, you don't see it. Also, if you match the color of the background, you just don't see it at all. So it's like you're not having it there, because when you are in the node editor, you really don't you just match and go into the grid. You see, it matches perfect with the grid, which is kind of like what a grid should do. You get off the way. So next, that is all with the UI, I think, and then let's see. The list of fixes and changes is huge, so let's get to it. First of all, this is a big one. The geometry nodes modifier is not gonna implicit convert to mesh and also realize make those instances reals anymore by default. The comment here by Hans says that we have nodes for those things at the moment, so it makes less sense to do things automatically, to convert automatically. You can read more in the link in the description about this, but I think it's a good decision. Make things like preserve the instances and the data as you have it. If you have points, there are points. Don't convert to mesh, or at least tell you, or like it should be more explicit. So that's why you have the nodes. The next addition is the random ID is now a built-in attribute. The ID is a built-in attributes. There's no more socket for the stable ID. Some people suggested that it was not easy enough to use. The functionality was there, but like you have an ID that you could pass around, and then if you change some values in distribution, for example, then those table IDs will stay as such, and it would prevent flickering, for example. This has been changed. Now there's an attribute called ID, and in the future there might be other attributes for like edge ID or face ID, while ID is just for the points. The next improvement is in the collection info node. Now the children, the child objects or the instances inside of the collection info are organized or sorted alphabetically, so it's more predictable. So at least there is some kind of sorting. The Raycast node now has a fields version that has been updated. The UI is much more clearer because it uses fields instead of attributes for inputs instead of outputs. So it should be faster too. Hey, that's nice to hear, since the evaluation system for fields provides multi-threading. Very welcome. Actually, there's a bunch of changes in optimization this week. Super happy to share that, and even on cycles. We're gonna talk that about in a bit, but yeah. Let's see. Next, by the way, again, these links are all in the description, so if I'm skipping some things in the description, is because we have a lot to cover today, and I don't want to run out of time. Fields version of curve to points node. Again, that a node that is now fields ready, and this is how it looks. Points, and it has a few outputs as fields that you can use for anything within this context. And it should also improve performance, I guess. Only the positions and the radius attributes are transferred by default now. The other outputs like tangent and rotation are outputted as anonymous with anonymous attribute. Interesting. And also because it's fields, it should be faster, right? According to the previous commit that we saw. There's a new node. There is a replace in string, which actually I think it was renamed. Is it? Let's see. String. Replace string. It's a slash string that has changed. But spoiler alert, that we're gonna see later. Replace string. So you give it a string, you find and you replace. Super simple. There is even pictures. So thank you for the pictures, Eric. So you are This is a test string and it's looking for TE and replacing it with XX. Oh, this even had a regex. I wonder if that it's not there though in the current patch. Maybe that didn't make it through. Or maybe I missed it. No, replace string. Oh, maybe it's not part of the last commit. Remember, all of this happened in the last couple weeks, right before the Blender 3.0 beta. So that means that everything that will go in has to be tested, or at least shouldn't be too risky to do. There are a few exceptions, but yeah, it's you may have seen some like so many features added, and some of them, if they were not ready, move to 3.1. 3.0 was like it's a big number, hasn't changed. Like 2.0 has been there for like over 20 years, 22 years or so. It's just it is a big number, but let's not forget that 3.1 is around the corner anyway. It's gonna be a regular release again every 4 months, so after 3.0. So no need to try and push everything now. All right, cool. Let's see. At the Boolean and integer input nodes, there is 2 new nodes in town. Super simple. Integer, Boolean. But this makes the building blocks for more complex setups. There is a new node called instance 2 points. You don't get confused with the instance from points. This is the opposite basically. So there is a video here where it says distribute points on faces. This is instance on points, and then instance 2 points. So so it's like going back. It has a selection input field. So thank you for working on it, Jared. I had a bunch of commits this week, Jared. The next, there's 2 new nodes again in town, the get and set for ID. So there is a node called ID and one for set ID. These ones are very straightforward. They're built-in here. There is a built-in attribute, but it's also handy to, I think this should be in input ID, yes. And for setting, I am lost. I don't know where would be the set ID, so I'm just gonna look for it. Where is in geometry? Set ID, okay. But if you search for it, you should search for ID, and you're gonna get ID, yes, ID and set ID. I hope for 3.1 the search can be improved, so this will show like the menu where you can find it, like sort of like what we have here in the here actually it says ID set. Oh wow, actually, oh, that's interesting. So if you use the F3 menu here inside of the node editor, because of context, that's super cool. I didn't know that. You can actually make use of this search instead of, why don't we just replace this operator with search filtered by like this search filter. Maybe it's not so hard. Kind of works already. So yeah, cool, awesome. Integer, Boolean, and geometry context. Next, okay, there's a bunch of texture nodes that have been added. There is, for example, the brick texture has been ported. You can see the amount that the long description. It's a shader node already, so there's people usually know how it looks, but because these were done like in the last month super quickly, and just to get them in, you have some tests. But yeah, you community are in charge of making the renders, such as the brick texture. There's also a checker texture, a wave texture, and my favorite, the magic texture. So you're gonna find them all here. If you do texture, you're gonna find pretty much all of them. There is all the regular ones, there are procedurals, and there is the new image texture node that has been added recently by Jack Luke, actually on a few days ago. It has a new image texture. It does not reuse the same node that in shading, because we want to be able to expose the image and frame as sockets. Oh, even the frame has sockets. Really? Oh, image. Wow, nice. That is that can lead to some nice visualization, VJing, almost kind of a thing, right? If you can see you can set the frame. I'm running out of voice. I haven't done this in a couple weeks. No, I'm lying. Actually, I stream on Friday twice for like in Spanish and in English. All right. This is for the image texture node. And speaking of image, the image socket is now available in the switch node. So you can switch to image. You may be familiar with the switch node by now. You can find the image now. You can set in and out. You can switch between the two. Why can't I make this they're wider? You can switch. That's super cool. Switch between two pictures, two images. Let's continue. That was for the image, the switch node. Okay, let's talk about curve stuff. In this case, the fill caps option in the curve to mesh node now allows you to fill the caps. It's a boolean that allows you to fill in the areas that were open in a curve to mesh node. Then bounding box, it has been updated to work on individual instances. This makes the bounding box node work on each unique geometry, including instances, individually, instead of making one large bounding box for everything. This makes the node much faster and is often the desired result anyway. For the old behavior, realize instance node can be used in front of this node. Versioning adds it automatically. So nothing should change, but if you want the old behavior, just add a realize instance node prior to that. Okay. The next update. Oh, geez, so many improvements. All right, volume to mesh. This one has been improved and updated to work with multiple grids, such as here you can see it's point to volume, and it has different volume to mesh, and it has, wow, points to volume has different levels and kind of works. How does it work? There is different levels. Yeah, this sounds like magic, right? There's different levels of resolution in these volumes, and then you join them. Interesting. Cool. That's amazing. That will solve many issues. All right. Oh yeah, user experience improvements as well. Not only new nodes, but also improving how you work with these nodes. And this update makes searching for attributes in the modifiers much easier. This update, I think it was on master for a very little in the previous system, but now, oh, what did I do? Okay, Blender never loses anything. Let's just go back. There you go. Never loses anything, Blender. Or almost never. Okay, so in the modifier now you can search when you have attributes here. You can just click and then click to search. This is also for outputs, I believe. Attribute search. This adds attribute to the geometry nodes modifier for the input and output attributes. Yes, the new search item though is only shown for the output attributes, which kind of makes sense. But yeah, so since we don't have anything here connected, I wonder if it would make sense to have. I was using this the other day, and here you can create a new one. Yeah, but it doesn't appear until you type. So new one, and then you can create a new one, and it will make a new attribute up here, as you can see. But yeah, I wonder like if we should just have these buttons, this that you need to drag and connect to something, like if this could be available here, like just like a button that you click and it adds it, or this would be the equivalent to just basically coming here and adding an input, right? So something like that. This plus button should be somewhere here, I think. Maybe. I don't know. Would that add a lot of noise? Let us know in the comments below or here. And the same for outputs, I think. Okay, the other improvement in the set position node has been improved. This the use vector socket for offset in set position node. So this replaces the Boolean offset with a vector input, much more friendly than a Boolean. It's 3 items, 3 components. Why? I'm looking at the comments. Why Blender and Blender Studio streaming nodes at the same time? Because that was random. Sorry, I didn't didn't mean to. I started with geometry nodes, but I have a bunch of topics I'm gonna be covering. There's nothing too special. I just happened to start with this. So yeah, now there is a there is a vector input for offsets. Is there any pictures? Yay! There you go. So offset, instead of being a Boolean, now is a very nice, neat vector. Again, some changes in defaults as well. The default for the raycast direction is now down instead of looking up, which is usually what people like to do, like just try to look down, find for some terrain. It's just the default. You can of course change the direction. The string substring has been renamed into slice string to go with the convention of having the verb at the beginning of the node name. Not everything is adding new nodes. There is also some optimizations. The Voronoi texture has been optimized. How much faster? Well, in this test, on a single thread and on a debug build, which are usually slower, a timer for calculating the smooth F1 Voronoi texture went from 16 to 9. That's nearly half. Super good. But yeah, did you know that? This is a nice comment that Charlie left here. It is recommended that artists use the lowest dimension settings for noise-based texture. So if you're using a noise and you're not gonna use 3 vectors like 3D, switch it to 2D. You're gonna save some gonna get some extra performance there. This is another small improvement in performance, but now the playback speed in a heavy instance, in a heavy scene with a lot of instances, went from 3.7 to 3.9, so 0.2 FPS. But hey, every update is welcome, such as improving the spreadsheet viewer. It's also a much more welcome addition. So the viewer node, so viewing values in the spreadsheet, now has support for fields. You can the viewer now that you can enable, you can toggle with Ctrl+Shift+Click, just like in other parts of Blender or in the node wrangler. Ctrl+Shift+Click now has an extra, so this viewer node now has an extra input for the field that you want to connect to. So if you select something with a geometry, it's going to connect the geometry. If you select something with just a field, it will show that. And as you can see, there is a viewer here option. Column, not option. Okay, renaming. Yes, some areas of the nodes, some nodes have had their inputs and outputs renamed. That's also something that should have, well, it was done before 3.0 went beta, and that's one of the reasons why you need a deadline for the beta, right? The UI has to stay as locked as much as possible, except for bug fixes. But for example, here, the subdivision surface, these geometry sockets were renamed to mesh sockets to make it more clear. It's like, what kind of geometry is a bit vague, which sometimes makes sense if it supports multiple domains. But if the node will convert to mesh, for example, then, or only work with meshes or curves or points, it's good that it's renamed. So that's the case for these nodes. Then more defaults. The set shade smooth now has a default on. turn it on. By default, it was off. So you had to turn it on, which is usually what you would do anyway. And okay, a bit of user interface, user experience more or less. But I placed it in this area of the nodes because it's very related to points and stuff. You can now, drum roll, you can now select point clouds in the viewport. This wasn't possible before. You have to click on the tiny little orange center. Not anymore. Now you can just click on the points. Super nice addition by Jared Johnson again, and I like that in the patch that Clement sound very excited. Solid work! Yay! And accepted. Super cool. Nice. Thanks. Oh, this was actually committed today, so this is not in 3.0. This is 3.1. Sorry, this week is gonna be a bit crazy with what is, most of it is gonna be in 3.0. Some things such as this one is gonna be in 3.1. Sorry, but well, unless actually there is a bunch of commits here. Is it because it's in both branches? Maybe I just miss it. No, why would it be? Well, it could go in 3.1 actually, because it's a regression otherwise. Anyway, the page doesn't seem to load. I'm gonna close some tabs I've been having opening new tabs like they are free. Oh no, I also, there you go. I also closed my notes where I'm reading what's new, and I think I covered everything in, yes, I did everything in the geometry notes section. So let's take a little breathe and continue. You know what? Let's talk about the asset browser. Asset browser has been improved greatly because remember, it was experimental. The only things you could do there was like post library stuff, and that's it. Now you have new options. By default, without going experimental, you can use materials, worlds, and object assets. That's pretty much, that's a lot. That is a lot. So the materials, worlds, and assets and objects are enabled now by default. This commit only covers materials and world, but the object was added afterwards because for the object to work, there was a so objects actually were working for a long time. Like you can drag and drop objects and it would work. Problem was that they will be placed like anywhere, like some random in space, or only the 3D cursor position, but it wasn't very handy. It wasn't very, you know, like you couldn't place it nicely. So for that, there has been a ton of work, a refactor, like a massive refactor of how snapping works. Sometimes you think like, oh, you can drag an object and now you can snap it. Oh, cool, they added that. You're like, oh, it's cool, of course, it has to be there. But under the hood, there were like many people involved on making this work. There is Germano mainly, but there is Julia, there is Campbell, there is like a bunch of developers in different areas, because snapping and object placing it's not related to the asset manager app browser in a way, right? So it's so cool to see the team working together. So yeah, basically now the asset browser, thanks to a ton of other patches, now you can drag and drop objects and it will use this placement tool. So you can snap it and place it with a little preview or where it's landing, similar to what you use in the when in the add cube or add object tool in the viewport. So yeah, you can add those and you can drop them at the cursor location as well. This change by Campbell makes it so you can drop where the cursor is, where the 3D cursor, just like if you were to add a new object. The speaking of the asset browser itself, now there is support for, in the asset browser, you're gonna see the if you see other asset libraries, you're gonna see the assets that are local to your own library, to the file that you're browsing in. So before it was so in the if the current file is saved within an asset library, showing that asset library in the asset browser will also display the assets from this current file now. So the assets will show a little Blender icon on the corner. So if you click on them here, you see it shows a little Blender little icon on the corner that tells you that this is from this file, this particular file. This is makes it easier to find, okay, this is a linked asset or this is actually just in my local file. So yeah, super nice. The filtering options have been improved as well. There's no picture here, but trust me, allows you to, here, asset browser, now you can filter. This is the same as in the same concept that you will find in the file browser or in other areas of Blender. So it's the same icon, same little thingy here. So it's all a same visual language. So super neat. That is all more unified. The filtering options show the type of assets that are possible to use here. However, if you enable the experimental settings, you may see that this menu is growing a lot because basically showing everything, but not everything here works. So keep in mind that not everything there works. So I think using extended asset browser for the time being is not needed anymore. I would personally not enable it locally for me anymore, because with objects, materials, and world, more than enough. And the other ones, it's just gonna make it confusing because you're gonna find these options for mark assets. They're they're gonna be grayed out in the places where you cannot use it. Let's see. Is that still free, Blender 3.0? No, Blender 3.0 is not gonna be free like 2.93. It's gonna be more free. So yes, more free, freer than 2.93. Blender is free forever, don't worry. 3.1, 3.2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all of the Blenders. It's written in the code, is part of the core. Then let's see what else. Okay, user interface. There's a bunch of user interface and experience improvements here. For example, if you drag an asset over an external catalog that is not supported yet, it's gonna tell you. Remember a few weeks ago I tried to demo this and it was a bit embarrassing because there were I couldn't do some things, but it wouldn't tell me that I couldn't do them, like dragging an asset inside of an external library. Makes sense that it's not possible to be done, but now it tells you, now it says, and it gives you a message while you're dragging it that it can't be done. Something that can be done right now is dragging catalogs to move them in the hierarchy. So yay for that. Actually, I haven't tested this. Let's see how can I break it. So whoa, nice. Hey, that's so cool. Huh, that's nice. I think once it's copied, it should open it by default. But that's just a tiny detail. So if I put it here in all, how do I move it out to the top? Unassigned? No. In the middle? No. Huh, interesting. Like for example, I have a catalog 02 and then I want to move it to the top. Maybe it's not possible yet. Okay. I'm okay. Hey, no, I'm fine with that. Oh, you can copy itself into. Okay. Okay, I'm breaking it, and I'm not. Okay, never mind. It's in alpha. No, beta. Okay, it's in beta. Can fail. Can fail. But the good thing now is that you can. If you don't save this, it means that it's that the changes haven't been saved because your blend file hasn't been saved, and it tells you in a nice little red warning why it can't be saved. So Maybe that red warning shouldn't be red anymore, because sometimes it's just not an error. It should be blue, like a info. But we need a completely new type of info color for that. Ensure. Okay, yeah. Well, I have a bunch of commits that are related to this. For example, when you add a new child, the catalog expands. So if you add a new one, and here you add a child, it expands it. Before it didn't used to expand it. Oh wow, now I'm creating catalogs with the same name as this one. I think I broke it. Sorry. Okay. More. The sidebar has the UI in the sidebar has been polished. So if I make a new asset, you're gonna see that the asset UI here is a bit more polished. There is still a bunch of stuff here that I don't think this should be on if you don't have developer. There you go. Without developer extras, is not here. There is material, source, description, and author. Those two settings, description and author, I would argue they would probably belong in a sub panel, like somewhere like extra, because most of the time you're not gonna be changing the author or description. It's more like extra data that we could add somewhere else. There is now the preview. Whenever you do any change, or it's gonna reset the preview. Tags are here now. They have this name. They don't have undefined name anymore. There is new author field up here, as you can see. You can claim your assets. Okay. When there is a library that is not found, you're gonna get a nicer message. Basically, it's gonna tell you here. Yes, it's gonna tell you why it cannot find it and the path that it cannot find, and it lets you open the preferences directly from the from the message. You click on it and wanna pop up the preferences, which is a very nice quality of life improvement. The the padding, the spacing between the assets has been reduced. So this is how it used to be, a bunch of space between the assets. Now there is a less spacing, so you can fit more. Actually, you can fit an entire, here's 4 rows, and there's nice. And the text, well, you can fit less text, but I'd rather have the more space. We need the rounded corners though. I don't know how yeah, that's probably a nightmare. Before getting into computer graphics and stuff, didn't know that rounded corners would be such a pain to do. Turns out computers like square things. Okay, and finally, the asset library preferences UI. The user interface for the preferences in the asset library has changed. Now the plus button is on the right, and when you click on plus, it actually opens the file browser, which makes sense. Before it would open a empty row and then you have to click on search. So now it just does it for you. Very nice. Little, it's on the little things. Okay. How much is left? Oof, I still have all the UI stuff. Okay, let's get through it. Let's talk a little bit about not geometry nodes. Let's talk about Grease Pencil. More precisely, line art. There's 3 line art changes this week. One of them is called stroke offset function. So you can offset it. You can offset the stroke, so it's not on top of the meshes directly, but you have a little bit of a distance between the original stroke and the final one. So there it has some orientation that you can choose, but yeah, that may solve some intersection issues. Together with that feature, there is another new feature that is called custom camera, which can become pretty handy if you had issues. For example, you know that a line art, whenever you move the camera, it gets recalculated, right? It depends on the camera view. But maybe that makes either the lines a bit more flickery, or maybe you just didn't want to do it. You didn't want to recalculate it. Well, there is a new setting that allows you to set a custom camera for that specific line art. It's in the line art modifier geometry processing panel. It's called custom camera. Once you enable it, super simple. And there is the so all the line art is gonna be calculated from that point of view. If you're baking, it also comes in pretty handy. And there is also an option in the stroke offset that allows you to move or like offset the strokes towards that custom camera. So it's pretty handy in both ways, pun intended. Okay, let's continue. The other change, it's called trimming edges right at the image border. So it's a also moved scan, overscan inside the composition, and this is the effect. So basically allows you to cut the edges in the image border. The naming I'm not completely sure because it's called trimming edges right at the image border, which to me that sounds like culling, right? Like geometry culling. But maybe I'm just confused. Maybe I just didn't get it right. But yeah, basically that's it. Image boundary trimming. Is that the same as culling? Cooling? I don't even know how to say it. But I know the feature. Okay, let's switch topic right now to video sequence editor. There is improvements in performance and also in the selection improvements. So when you select items in preview mode, now it will cycle. If you keep clicking without moving the mouse, it's gonna cycle through the items that are behind, just like in the 3D viewport. So yay for consistency. The center selection is a penalty for the active strip. So the active strip is not going to have center selection. Also, use a temporary selection list to avoid moving the sequence strips out of the scene during selection. So when you add it back, the order is kept. I think that's more under the hood stuff. Okay. The other improvement, my favorite, I think, this week is performance. Thumbnail performance. So the loading of the thumbnails, the process internally has been split into 2 passes, which gives you up to, in some tests, 3 times better performance. So 3 times faster. Yay. Very much welcome. The remember that I think 2 weeks ago, I mentioned that in the video editing, in the section here, now there is an overlays setting, and now there is a 2D cursor setting, so you can disable the 2D cursor, which it's an overlay. It was added a couple of weeks ago. The cursor in this case is not as useful as in the 3D viewport, but also since that is available in the 3D viewport as an overlay, makes sense to have it also in the sequence editor. And last but not least, the sequencer options for images has been exposed in the menu. So transform operators are now in the menu. So there is an image. I don't know if it's called image. Yeah, it's called image, which is a bit weird because not all images. It's weird because this is for image widgets. I have to test this still. But this is not an image. Would that apply? Well, no, I think this should only show for images, right? For image strips. Not sure. Gotta check that one. Okay, we have cycles, Popover section, VR, even tracking, and user interface. Let's get over with the user interface. There is a major change in how custom properties are shown or drawn. So if you look at the basically it's better if I just show you here. So let's open a new file and let me open any kind of custom property. So here, let's go to the object custom properties. First, there is a new button called new button called new, This one is more similar to what you will see like when you have like a new of other stuff. Here we need a new modifier. The modifier should be called new, right? Like new modifier, or like, no, because it's not a data block. Oh, it is. The custom property now has gone is the outline, the box outline, which really didn't add much. Now the more than just a separation. The box is used for grouping, but there can only be one custom property at a time, so there is no point in grouping stuff. The editing is now more, it's not called edit, it's not a button called edit, it's just an icon, and there's also the delete next to it, so you can quickly delete those. Don't worry, this supports undo, so you're not gonna lose a bunch of stuff. The last I think would be cool, like, what do you think if you click on new to show this pop-up? So I mean, after you add a new, you're probably likely to either change the type, change the name. That's one thing that cannot be changed here. So I think it would make sense. Even, what about if you click on new, that it will do this. So open the property with the cursor in property name. So you can start typing right away. And then change the type, which is something that is pretty handy now. From within here. What you think? Okay, next. The well, there is a bunch of changes here. There is a, it uses right factor, the UI, the columns width, and it's much more unified with the rest of Blender. Oh, something I forgot to mention in the node editor when I was talking about the node editor previously is that you may have noticed this, there's breadcrumbs. Yay! So it's just the same way that you have breadcrumbs up here in the properties editor. Now you have here. They look a bit different now. They have to be unified, so to use the same concept. But in this here makes much more sense because when because you can see the object that you have selected, similar to what you see here in the top left. Then you also have the modifier name. So this is modifier, my modifier, like my documents. Then you have geometry nodes. So this is my geo nodes. So you know you're like, this is the geometry nodes. And then if you have a node that is inside of a node group, now you also have this available. So you have another group, and all uses its regular icons. Also works on shading as well. You can have there, and if you have a group, you can see the route, object, mesh data, or object data, material, and node group. And the same, if you continue, what I like is that it tries to fit them all and it collapses them, so you can always fit as much as possible there. All right, let's see. What else? In the, speaking of user interface here, in the, why do I keep having this thingy enabled? I think I'm just gonna start a new. Okay, there. The sidebar. Yeah, when the sidebar is hidden, now you're gonna see the icon of the current tool. Previously, there used to be the name of the tool here, but it proved to be not ideal, especially for when using other languages. Some tools, especially in Spanish, it's like, geez, it's. I know we have a we have a lot of words and very long words in Spanish, but I didn't know it would be that bad. Like, there are some of them that are like just way too long. I don't remember which one was the one there, but I think it was some kind of this borrador de desplazamiento multiresolución. Come on, there must be a shorter. Anyway, the name used to be displayed here, so that would be impossible to read. And also, every time you change a tool, it will jump around, so that is no longer the case. Now this it's just the icons going to be shown when you have collapsed it. it would be great to have the name of the tool on mouse over, but yeah, can't do everything. Okay, let's see the next improvement. Animation, yay, animation stuff. This week there are improvements in animation. Oh, let me change back to English, please. Automatic. Read it from my computer. Okay, animation. Yes, the animation, the dope sheet. Now, dope sheet has a search function. So now when you do Control F, it's gonna focus on the field that it makes sense to, instead of bringing up the pop-up. It used to have a pop-up. So I think we can improve. It would be great to have Control F with the mouse over here to also do this focus here. And because in this editor it works, Control F goes here. Now it does it in the dope sheet. We miss it in the outliner. Okay, next improvement. Low-key dropping some feature requests there in case there are developers watching and it's like, oh, maybe. There, okay. Icons are more aligned now. Yay, this week. Small detail, but when you put them all together, it really makes a difference. Look at them. Look at the difference. So this is before, after. And the same when you see them in the view in the outliner. Yay. So good. Attention to detail. Thank you, Gilberto, for working on that. It's super cool to see people that are worried about those tiny little details here and there. So when linking appending in the file browser, now there is an icon and a checkbox. So this is similar to the filtering settings that I showed before. Now the same concept has been brought into the file browsers, not only the asset browser. There is now support for showing gizmos, transfer gizmos in pose and weight paint mode, plus weight paint mode. Yeah, that's it. It's a setting. You can enable it from the gizmos popover, also known as the navigation popover down here. So yay for that. Then yay for Linux and Mac users now have default font folders. I think it was only available for Windows. Now it's available for Linux. Although Linux has plenty of places where to save the fonts, I personally save them in my local folder, in my home fonts. But you can tweak that. If you don't tweak that, it's going to go to the system, which is user share fonts for Linux and library fonts for Mac OS or iOS. Okay, file browser. Speaking of fonts, when you click on open fonts, now the file browser will open in preview mode and in the folder that it makes sense to. Okay, let me test that. I'm curious if it will work. I haven't tested that one. So okay, let's go. I open text. I go to the text settings. Let me look at that. Look at all this space that there is here. We could have default settings like font, like a regular software. Size, font, spacing, alignment, just like a little toolbar here. That would actually be a good first time, because it's just moving stuff over, not moving, copying. That would be a good first time patch. Okay, let's see. Click, ta-da, user share. Hey, it didn't go into fonts. Maybe I don't have a font. Fonts, yeah, it does. It didn't go inside fonts. But yeah, it shows. That's cool. Super neat. There. Huh, nice. Okay. The next change. Use flat. Okay. Now the changes that I'm gonna show you are mainly just visual changes. They're just static changes. One of them, for example, was getting rid of the very last use of gradients for widgets or for elements in the UI, in Blender UI, hard-coded gradients. You can have gradients in the widget if you enable the shaded version option toggle on each one of the widgets. But in the case of strips, they are not widgets really, they are just their items in the UI, and they had this hard-coded gradient. No longer the gradient is gone. Now there is a flat color, and in this image you see rounded corners, but based on feedback from the community, the corners are back to they're just square. That hasn't changed. The only thing that is gone is the shaded, the gradient. The other change that I was done this week, last week, was it's a fix. I consider this a fix, and there are many more fixes to be done in the theming. Just basically, there are some parts, some widgets in the UI that do not use what they're supposed to use, such as the tabs. When the tabs were highlighted, there is even a text a setting called region text highlight, but it wasn't being used. Now it is. So now you can do things. Before it would only use the region text. So if you wanted to have like some tabs dark and some tabs light, you couldn't, because it would only use one color for the text. Now it does. So now you can have light color for unselected and dark for selected, for example. This wasn't possible before. So yay for theming flexibility. And speaking of theming, there has been a big change. It was the one that you probably found, you noticed the most. It was the change in the UI that I've been using here on Blender today for a long while. The biggest change is that now the panels have the shape, like they look like panels. They have an outline, and there is some separation between them, so it makes them more like items that you can actually touch and grab and move and expand. And I been testing this here on the channel, and I got a lot of positive feedback, mainly positive feedback. And this is something that it can be that it was here a few weeks ago. It was just not changed in the theme. Now it is changing the theme. There is I've got a lot of feedback from things that are broken on the theme, like if you edit text is unreadable, and also the edit text in list items, and also if you use, for example, some kind of curve, you see that also this is white, and when it didn't used to be white, and it's weird. Because why is it weird? Well, because the Blender theme settings are a bit weird and disconnected. For example, the regular item here, it's setting this color. So this is a widget, but it's using settings from regular. And this is a list item, but it's using stuff from the regular setting. So this is we're aware of that. We're gonna fix it this week, I bet, together with other changes. There have been some feedback related to the color, the lack of contrast, or maybe some areas that are a bit too dark, or just some items are hard to tell. I hope we can get those fixes in for 3.0, but yeah, ideally no UI changes besides bug fixes should be done, because people when the beta starts, people are encouraged to start making tutorials and writing books and all of that. So if you change the UI, how the UI looks is gonna be, it's not great, right? Like, it's not great. So the yeah, so expect some fixes. Hopefully we can get more. I need to convince the team for those, but yeah, more to come. Okay, speaking of I think that covered most of it, most of the changes. The tracking, well, this is just the one feature. This could have been potpourri. The tracking, in the tracking editor, now you can select multiple tracks and edit them at the same time. Remember that a bit obscure feature that if you hold Alt and perform like a change in a widget, it will affect to multiple objects selected. In this case, is now supported for the tracks, together with the copy to selected. So if you have a bunch of tracks and you want to copy a setting, just right click on the setting and you'll see the copy to selected option, similar to what is available already in other sections. Okay, I am way over time. How much is it? 1 hour 10. I still have a bunch of changes from Cycles, VR, and Popover. Should I drop it here? It's already 1 minute, 1 hour 10. And then next week I cover all of that, I think. I have to go home and stream in Spanish. So I think I'm going to cut it here. 2 weeks worth of updates, yes. So I'm going to cut it here because there is a few changes on Cycles, and some of them I also need to ask the developers for feedback. There is VR and some random Popover changes. It's not really that much, actually. So many changes. Agree. Nice. Okay, cool. Okay, let's cut it here because it's a bit too long. Then people watch it offline and complain that it's too long. It's too long. Okay, cool, great. Yes, because I have to go home and stream the Spanish version of Blender today, plus yeah, wrapping up on everything here. Sorry for the delay today. Is that we stream on Friday on the Blender Studio YouTube channel, and I had to bring all my gear downstairs. It's a bit of a mess. If you haven't watched it, by the way, just go check it out. It's super cool. We have Blender Studio. We have the live stream there, and in the live stream you have you have people from the studio jumping in. You see people eating in the background. There's Stone jumping in. Directors from the director of the film, co-director as well, Hjalti, everyone from the team, and sharing their details. It's 2 hours long, but I think it was super worth checking it out as a little bit of a teaser of what the team is gonna share with their making of and all their material they're preparing for after Blender Studio. Again, if you haven't watched the film, please go watch it. Share it with your friends and family, and family that are over 13 years old. But that's it. Okay, so I will call it a day. Thanks for tuning in once again. It's been great. Let's do it again. Same place. It's November, dude. Oh my, it's my last month here. I'm gonna be on holidays by the end of the month. So we have 1, 2. Okay, today is over. 1, 2, 3 more live streams and it's finished. Okay, the year is finished. Let's do it again next week, same place, same time, and the countdown begins. So watch your ear holes because I'm gonna click the button in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I wasn't too loud. I had it lower. It wasn't extremely loud. Okay, time to wrap it up. See you next week. Bye.